Jeremy's head rung from the impact, like a tolling bell vibrating incessantly in his mind. His hand instinctually grasped at the back of his skull, his short brown hair damp from blood, confirming the sharp stabbing pain in his head. He groaned, blinking his eyes to focus them, as a thumping, aching pain permeated every inch of his body. He could see very little, the light of the surface above him but a distant point from this depth. He had to be at least 100 feet down, he thought to himself, as the immediate shock began to fade and the circumstances of fall returned to his mind. For only moments ago, he had been on the surface, out-calibrating the terrestrial sensor station positioned in one of the distant fields that formed part of the Noel farmstead outside of New Dresden. It was early in the day, around 9 a.m. when he was going about his routine diagnostics, when the ground below him began to shake violently and audibly crack. And without warning, he felt himself begin to fall. Jeremy was fortunate. His fall had quickly turned into a tumble and slide as he crashed into a sloped, stony chasm that buffered him from the worst of the impact. A straight fall into the subterranean lair probably would have killed him. Yet from the throbbing pain that ached in his bones and muscles, he confirmed to himself that he was very much alive. Jeremy slowly got to his feet, checking his body as he did. There were plenty of cuts and some contusions severe enough to instantly bruise. And there were the blood on his head, his hair already matting from the sticky coagulation. All things considered, it was a miracle he was in one piece. His eyes, still blurry, began to adjust to the dark as confusion filled his mind. Tunnels. A vast network of tunnel entrances were arrayed around him, deep, dark openings that contrasted with the subtle illumination of the chasm open above him. There shouldn't have been anything like this, Jeremy thought to himself. The board's geological reports had always confirmed nothing but near-perfect tectonic stability and subsurface integrity. I will have to report this, he said to himself as he looked up at the distant sunlight above him and slowly made his way over to the pile of broken shards of rock and aggregate that he had brought down with him. He began to make his way back up the sloping chasm wall that had buttressed his descent, but the incline was too steep. There was no use. There was no way out. He turned and reached down to his belt, fumbling at a small torch before retrieving it and switching it on. The beam of light immediately illuminated the cavern around his, revealing a vast open space, some 50 feet in diameter and 100 feet in height. He shone the beam of light out in front of his towards the tunnel, surveying his surrounds in hope of finding a way out. Eyes. He saw them for only a moment, a brief flash of illuminated silver and white eyes in one of the tunnels before him. It was almost too quick, his mind dismissing the possibility almost as soon as the shock of the flash had appeared. His adrenaline, that had begun to crash after the alarm of his drop, spiked once again. But this was different. This was a fight or flight response, and he could feel his body tense instinctually. The torch beam lingered for a moment, fixed at where he swore he had seen the pair of eyes. His haggard breath was thunderous in his ears, yet he was startled again, this time hearing a sound to his left. He spun around, moving the light in time to see something move. He couldn't make it out exactly, but it almost looked like a leg, as it was pulled back behind the lip of the tunnel. Yet the suddenness of the movement was enough for the fear welling in Jeremy to take hold of him. In his terror-filled desperation, he called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" His voice echoed through the cavern and through the myriad of tunnel entrances. For a long pause, there was no response, and soon Jeremy's mind began to reassure him that it was all in his head. And then he heard it. A gravelly voice, almost imperceptible to the ears, filled with harsh whispered tones, responded from right behind him. "We Jeremy spun again, this time leaping back as the light of his torch illuminated the source of the voice. At first, he thought it was a person. Maybe someone was nearby and had come to rescue him, he began to tell himself. But then his mind began to process the details of the figure before him. It was tall, unnaturally so, approaching 8 feet in height. It was thin and wiry, lithe in a sickly way. Its skin was gray as stone and adorned haphazardly with all manner of jagged ridges and protrusions jutting from across its otherwise naked torso of bone and sinewy fibrous muscle. The creature's face that filled Jeremy with the utmost terror. There were large eyes, pupilless and black, barred for the light reflected from his torch. Its nose was also missing, replaced by a mangled sinus hole. Yet its mouth triggered a primal response from Jeremy. The creature opened its large maw to reveal its razor-sharp teeth, rows of fangs like a shark from Lost Earth. It was a sight of abject horror, and then, without warning, the creature attacked. Jeremy, unable to flee, struggled against his attacker's grasp. But despite the creature's appearance, it easily overpowered him, pushing him to the ground once more before picking up one of Jeremy's legs and dragging him away. Jeremy clawed at the ground as he was dragged, desperate for a handhold that would serve as his salvation, or at least a delay to the seemingly inevitability of his demise. But he found none on the smooth stony floor of the cavern. Moments later, the cavern was empty of all but the sound of Jeremy's screams of pain and terror echoing from one of the numerous tunnels. But even the torturous sounds of Jeremy's horror began to fade away into the distance. As the last hints of Jeremy's horror-filled screams finally dissipated into the thick air, the cavern fell once more into silence, leaving little trace of Jeremy. His fate unknown, never again to be seen.